So leading growth design teams, again, is as nascent and as much of an unknown as the tools that Lex has been sharing. And I think the biggest caveat I want to share with all of you is my role and my journey in leading design teams, coming from my roots as a designer. It really doesn't matter whether I'm leading a design team that's focused on growth or discovery, or maybe brand and marketing is a slightly different skill set. But hopefully by the end of this talk, you'll understand, or you'll get a feel for what are the core attributes that a leader needs to have, and then what is it that's specific to growth, a lot of which in its nuance, Lex has done an amazing job covering it. So in my talk, I'm going to cover it across product, people, and practice. But before anything, let's really get this friction out of the way. So my name is Chetana, and if you read it in Hindi, my grandmother can read all your names exactly how it's meant to be said if it was written in Hindi, because it's phonetic. I have been in the Bay Area pretty much for 19 years, and 11 years I've been in the product design and leadership roles. And I've been really fortunate to be leading teams that have solved problems with a user base of less than 1 million to most recently at Netflix, a user base of 160 million, maybe even more with whatever the last quarterly earning was. And the thing that I've enjoyed most about my work recently is figuring out what a growth design team looks like when you're trying to scale a product globally. Especially when my design team is a team of designers who are sitting here in Los Gatos, or who are born and brought up in the Silicon Valley and are trying to design a product for someone in Korea, Japan, or India. How is that going to work? The last thing you want is to put a design leader who's from India and have her tell them what to do. Not going to work for my job then. So these are some of the places I've worked at. It's a mix of larger corporations like Yahoo, Netflix, and Stanford, including smaller startups. I don't think it's small anymore, Script, Pivotal Labs. And then my own personal passion has been in the design education space. I've been with Interact Project for almost 10 years now. Anyone here volunteering with Interact Project? Heard of them? Yes. White Space was an amazing experiment, design accelerator program, kind of like General Assembly and Design Lab, and then Design Lab is still doing very well. So it's a balance of me being in the day job, but bringing back to the community by teaching design through some of these organizations. And last but not the least, once you move into a design leadership role, you realize my self being invisible is what makes my role very impactful. So I couldn't be here if it wasn't for the teams, people with whom I have learned and grown as a leader. So here are just snapshots of my team at Scribd. It's humbling and an honor that folks from my team are here in the audience. And then my team at Netflix. So just want to call out that being in a design leadership role is really the sum total of all of these experiences put together. Most recently, I was leading the growth design team at Netflix. It's one of the 4 design teams, the other 3 focusing on the member experience, and this team was focusing on the non-member experience. And I will include some examples as I walk through the conversation. On Twitter, you can find me at Chetana Deorah and connect on LinkedIn. So with that, my talk has been structured in these 3 core buckets, and the way I normally tend to think of any space is what are the key questions I would have, or you guys in the audience would have, without knowing how many of you are really experts in growth and how many of you are coming here really to get a primer. In my mind, these are some of the questions that came up as I was doing conversations with Andy and Lex, who've been absolute huge partners in helping define the content for this talk. So these are some of the 6 questions, hopefully by the end of which you'll get a summary of what does it mean to lead design teams for growth. So what does designing for growth mean? I was going to ask you all, what are some of the words on your mind when I asked that question? But since Lex has done an amazing job with her talk, I'm sure you guys are buzzing with a lot of these jargons. When I moved into leading design teams for growth, and I had growth designers on my team who were like rocket science level with growth, it was very unnerving to be leading a team of designers who knew what all of these words meant. So this is just to give you a snapshot that it is a very vast and deep area of focus, and it's not expected for each one to know everything. Please really let's humbly come to terms with that. But a reminder, at least in this room, we have shared this definition for growth, and with this as a linchpin, I'm going to focus on an aspect that is very core to the user-centered approach to product design, which ties back into being a successful growth product designer, because Lex has done a great job covering the metric and data side and the high impact side of growth design. So by getting to know the customer, get the customer and keep the customer, what does that mean? So here's a snapshot of, this is an artifact that my team, we created at Netflix. So my role in Netflix was really pivotal in 2018-19, continues in 2020. How can Netflix grow given it's pretty maxed out in US, Europe, even LATAM? It's the APAC countries, Korea, Japan, and India, where Netflix is not the go-to entertainment resource because those cultures, those lifestyles do have other ways for entertainment. So here's just a snapshot of the customer profile that we created from the market research information that we got and some of the data from the countries. And what I have come to realize as a design leader supporting my team is no matter what the data and the metrics say, it is the design team's responsibility to meet the customer where they are. So if these customers are not in the US and they are in Korea, Japan, India, have you been to their home and have you seen where exactly do they watch Stranger Things 3 or a documentary? Are they watching it with their family or are they watching it alone? And then once you've gotten to know them, provide them reasons to believe in Netflix, and those reasons are not the same for everyone. So the interesting thing that I found out, so my team, we had 2 deep dive immersions. It was a 7-week cross-functional team that went to Tokyo last year, and then a 7-week cross-functional immersion with the team in India this year. And actually tomorrow's talk, Andy's been able to get Derek, who's going to do an amazing job diving into the details because he was the lead prototype designer on both these projects. So what I want to share is growing the product is different from building the product. So you may have your target audiences when you're trying to develop your product and you're trying to reach product market fit. But once you've gotten your product market fit, growing your user base is a different skill set, which is really the kind of genesis of our talk today. I just want to give you a few seconds to read some of these user quotes that we learned when we introduced something as simple as a free trial, which for someone in the US, for example, Harry here, or for us here, $8.99 per month of Netflix is not a big deal. For the salary we have, for where we live, how tech savvy we are. So for us, it's cool. We'll just try it for 30 days and decide. In India, that same growth tactic had this skepticism. Free? I know how to use free things. Why are you asking me for my credit card in the registration process? Boom. I'm out of the flow. In Tokyo, the skepticism was, something must be wrong that Netflix is giving me this for free. Why is it free? Maybe it's not good enough. It's not it doesn't fit with my social gamut in terms of me telling people I've subscribed for something free. And then Buenos Aires, they know how to solve it. We'll just get one account, watch it for 30 days, and we'll share the account and we will divide the cost and we'll continue watching Netflix. Because for the other thing that I won't cover in the talk today, obviously, is the role of content. The growth design team and the product design team cannot really do much about the content, which at the end of the day is what makes a product like Netflix what it is today. Another way of defining what it means to design for growth is this classic graph that Lex reminded me is the pirate metrics for startups that Dave McClure put together. These were the kind of words that would daunt me as a designer or a design leader: activation, acquisition, retention, referral, revenue. And I'm thinking, where is the emotion? So what I found really helpful, he also calls out the mindset or the areas of inquiry that a designer or a product manager or an engineer on your team should consider when these heavy lifting words show up in front of you. I'm not saying that they are not important. It is important to understand, after product market fit, at what phase is your product and your company currently. If you're doing very well with acquiring new users, but they're churning out, or you're retaining users, but they're still canceling after the first 30-day trial, you do need to know where you sit in the overall trajectory. But I find the value of the question really allows for a product manager and a designer to kind of come together and align on the problem statement. The second part within the product realm of leading design teams for growth, when I interview designers, I often find it interesting. It's rare that I go out looking for a growth product designer with that kind of experience and then have them join my team. So I look at their portfolio and I try and see, do they have that mindset and that aptitude to design and solve for growth experiences? And the first thing I encounter in the interview is even them wondering, what kind of problems are you talking about, Chetana? So I find this, I have found this very useful in my own career as a design leader, and with the work I did both at Scribb, where my design team was responsible for the discovery design, the core product experience, as well as the growth aspect, because it was a single design team catering to all of Scribb. And then at Netflix, there are 4 design teams, one of which is the non-member experience or growth. But what I find really interesting is to recognize that making money, especially today with digital products that are there, could be an ad model like Facebook or Pinterest, could be a subscription model, which is really where the present and the future is going. We're at a point where you can subscribe for jewelry. We're at a point where your clothes can be subscribed. I never thought I would subscribe for my food delivery, but so subscription model is something that's really at the kind of crossroads of where things are going next. Transaction model, of course, we're all familiar with that. Here it tends to have 2 user types, the generator and the consumer, the dasher and the person who's ordering. And then what does growth look like if you're designing for a freemium model? So I just found this framework to be very helpful in terms of that what drives the revenue will also help inform the designers in terms of the design strategies. And when I use the word design strategy, I mean content strategy, copy, interaction design, UX decisions, visual design, and any of the sort of animations or delight or whatever you do. Because the decisions you make when it's an ad model is quite different from the decisions when you make for a subscription model. In a subscription model, you want to create designs in a way that your user sees recurring value in wanting to come back to your product. In an ad model, your user has to make a competing decision with all the ads around him and the trigger in that moment where he says, okay, I'm going to pay for this right now. The other thing to understand about designing for growth and the way in which you structure a team, unlike teams where it's a mobile designer or a TV designer or an AI designer, growth designers or product designers who design for growth typically are people who are very comfortable designing across platforms. That doesn't mean that they know it all. That only means that you're willing and open to take your strategies and your concepts and work across platforms. So at Netflix, for example, my team was responsible for growth design solutions, meeting customers where they were on iOS, Android, web, mobile web, and TV. Sign up on TV. If anyone has done it here, I'll give you a gift card from Netflix. So moving a little bit into what are some of the design opportunities or problem areas that a growth design team would be looking for? A lot of my examples will be rooted in the subscription model because I've chosen to walk you guys through some of the things we did at Netflix. So here's just a snapshot of what are some of the experiments or concepts going on. On TV, last year the team experimented with video on non-member homepage. You'll start wondering, this is the fine line where marketing design and product design really starts intersecting. But it's a very critical question for a design leader to answer with his or her cross-functional lead partners on where the product design team for growth is seated. Is it on the product side or on the marketing side? To Lex's point, I would vote on the product side because marketing designers for growth have a different portfolio and a different channel through which they solve for design problems. And I think I have some content on that. So here's just an example of video on non-member homepage or the logged out homepage for Netflix. And then I'll show you what the flow looks like once you're logged in. So with that, how many in this room are Netflix subscribers? And how many of you have logged out or signed out of Netflix recently? And stay logged out? Okay. So that is the interesting part about products that are designed for subscription model. It's very rare, and you can see the copy here, that we really don't want you to sign up. And therefore, you don't get to see what the growth designers worked on. This is what the team works on. It's the logged out homepage, which you may be in a bucket, you may be in a test variant. What you're seeing here may be different from what someone's seeing in India, what someone is seeing in Japan. It's the registration, picking the plan, educating you about what type of pricing model we have, helping you create your account, which could be through an email address or a phone number. Setting up your payment method. When you're a company at the scale of Netflix, payment methods, payment infrastructure becomes a deep, complex bucket in and of itself. You can have an entire squad or pod that's dedicated on payment modalities. Credit card is working in US and European countries, but in India, they want cash. Then you have someone like Amazon Prime who says, I will deliver you your goods at your doorstep and I'll take cash. But Netflix cannot do that. The last piece in the flow is onboarding or first-time user education, which is really a very sweet spot, oftentimes underestimated and falls through the cracks because it's not the non-member experience, it's not the member experience, it's the new member experience or onboarding. And I think on Thursday we have an amazing chat at Adobe with Raghu, who's right here, who's going to walk us through what are some of the things that one keeps in mind in terms of onboarding your brand new customer. Because what's the point if you got their foot in the door? So for some of the markets with regards to Netflix, it's not that they don't sign up. They take the free 30-day trials. Day 31, they put a reminder to cancel. Because even in those first 29, 30 days, they haven't seen the value proposition for Netflix. So today, the onboarding experience is very simple. We try and understand who the customer is. And remember, we cannot get much data about you because this is all unauthenticated. This is all logged out experience, so we cannot really track you or know you. The only thing we have about you is your email address. And last but not the least, voila, you're in your logged in Netflix member experience, which probably most of you are familiar with. So that's just to give you a snapshot of what the growth design experience looks like typically. But the types of problems that a team would solve, and I won't get into too much detail here, is if the product has a lot of maturity and you can tap into the loyalty of your user base, you may do something like a member referral, more commonly known as gifted to a friend, or product sampling. One of the ways to incentivize a new user is let them taste your product. New York Times is notorious for this. They'll give you a sneak peek for an article. You're getting really into it. Boom, comes your growth tactic. Please sign up for New York Times if you want to continue reading. Offers is something where it's a huge partnership with your PM and the biz dev folks. Maybe for a certain country, credit card usage is very low, so you tell them, well, if you want to sign up with debit card, great, but if you sign up with a credit card, we can give you a certain 3 months free. Free trial, everyone's pretty familiar with. Cancellation Flow, a favorite project of mine, and members from my team at Script are very familiar with how we went through this, what we were calling dark patterns. So the other thing with growth design and the responsibility that designers have is, yes, it's not a growth business if you're making it easy for your members to cancel, but that also doesn't mean you make it very difficult for cancellation. And all the product managers in this room who have been guilty of that, design as a strategic partner now. So cancellation flow, account pages, payment pages, form page designs, all of these areas of the products that are very geeky, very nuanced, where usability really is a break or make situation, is a core part of what a growth design team is responsible for. Pricing plans. I'm not saying that the designer on the team comes up with the price point. There's a whole, science and mechanics behind it. If you're a smaller startup company, you'll have a, smaller team working on it, or one person wearing many hats. But if you're a company like Adobe or Netflix, there's a whole math and psychology and science behind pricing and plans. But the designers are responsible for how that pricing is displayed, how the choices are made. Payment, of course, I touched on it. Customer support, at least at Netflix, was very integral to the growth team because it was very helpful for the designers to get qualitative research, even from the phone calls that the customer support was getting in India, Japan versus in the US. Completely different pain points. And then the last two that I want to call out, absolutely new member experience, and a big channel for growth, typically that business stakeholders look into is partnerships and bundles. So the one that you all may be very familiar is when you sign up for Comcast or T-Mobile, you can get a certain access to Netflix. That entire co-branded user experience is something that a product designer on the growth team would be responsible for, because you have to understand where is the handoff. Where does the Comcast UX and UI start, and where does it transition into Netflix, and what does that look like? On the marketing side of growth, and this is just to give you a very tiny nuance into the product design side of growth and the marketing design side of growth. I was most recently on a flight coming back from Europe, and much to my, delight, I landed on this, the curiosity in me, of course. I won't just go to the blockbuster movie. I was poking around and I found this section where I see Headspace positioned in this aircraft that I'm going to be a captive audience for the next 9 hours at least. And it tells me I can learn about an introduction to meditation. It tells me Headspace for jet lag. Or I think I removed that slide maybe. Headspace for jet lag. In my mind, and as I was going to share with you all in this talk today, it couldn't have been better perfect timing and moment, where to realize the channel and the timing to meet the customer where they are, that itself was so delightful that I went and did the meditation. Even though it was completely, I think by that time may have been 4.5 hours on the flight. So just a snapshot of, and again, growth designers are completely welcome to be a partner with their marketing team or their social media team in terms of driving this conversation, even though they may not be the ones executing it. So in short, growth solves for the forgotten areas within the end-to-end customer journey across platforms, with the differentiator being the focus is on high impact. As Lex pointed out, it's not about features. The term forgotten areas is something I read in the Reforged Growth Program, and I think it really captures the core of what growth design does. Moving to the second section of the talk, which is about people. Who are all the people that play a role in solving for growth? As Lex mentioned, we shouldn't forget that this is not a solo sport. At a very high level, this shouldn't be a surprise to most of us in the room. The 5 key core partners for any product design team are the data scientists, the engineers, consumer insights, and product managers. Depending on the size of the company, there could be one person wearing many hats. The bubbles on the outside is what I was dealing with at Netflix, because the scope of the product growth was such that localization was very, very critical to some of the tests we were launching. Content strategy was very integral to the growth design team, including our work with brand and marketing, which was based in LA. So this is just to say it is very much still a cross-functional endeavor. So how does one set up a cross-functional team for growth? The questions that I've heard oftentimes is, how do we make a growth team fit in the organization? Or how do we create a growth team? Everybody has it, we don't have one. Some of these questions are really probably not the right ones to ask, because the way that a growth team becomes really relevant is once the growth opportunity and the focus becomes clear. As Lex mentioned, it's not about goals, it's the goal that a particular product wants to accomplish, and then the expertise to fulfill that goal comes together. So this is a snapshot of how I worked with my cross-functional leaders at Netflix to come up with what we called 4 key areas of focus, or 4 goals that we had. Audience growth is about finding new customers or customers who are unfamiliar with Netflix. Sign up is bulk of the flow that I showed you: registration, account creation, payment, pricing. Partnerships is making deals with third-party vendors, and the new member experience. This core team then worked with acquisition marketing. Messaging included emails and notifications. SEO and social media are also integral to propel the growth of a company. Just to give a different snapshot, another way that a growth team can be organized, which was true for the goals that at that time Pinterest may have had, is in their case, they had a cross-functional team for activation, unauthenticated experience. They really focused on emails and notifications and decided those disciplines that need to be shared resources can be a pool of itself. So my point here is there isn't a magic formula or a one-size-fits-all. Growth teams are best structured when they're driven by the goal or the focus that the particular product has at that moment in time. Last but not the least, no matter what these teams look like, how big they are, how small they are, I fully understand the value of measuring for growth and the high impact for growth. But the difference that having design be a strategic partner in growth is that the design team can hold the North Star or the vision for a project that needs to be tested. And I have a little bit more insight into how that can happen. So the people that are involved in a growth team is a cross-functional team. It's best if they are highly aligned in that North Star, in that core problem, but they are loosely coupled because they will have different tactics in the way they execute their experiment. You don't want to micromanage how they may go about solving their problems, as long as they are all attacking it from different sides but towards the same goal. And last but not the least, something I've learned experientially, members of a particular pod in the entire growth team, if they sit together, it's magic. I know we tend to be kind of birds of the feather where all PMs want to sit together, all designers want to sit together, engineers want to sit together. But when it comes to solving growth problems, it's really a matter of night and day in the level of efficacy and effectiveness if the team can sit together. If it's a company like Netflix, the whole floor has to move and we have to do floor planning then. So, for design leaders in the room here, I'm sure this has always been a burning question. There is a comrade of mine, Angel Steger, wrote an amazing article. She was at Pinterest and then Dropbox. That I really like the phrasing of this question, where it is spotting product designers for growth as opposed to just saying it's growth designers. And Lex and I had a very interesting discussion on how she and I framed this. And to give you a snapshot of what are the key areas I look for when I'm talking to a product designer, looked at their portfolio, did a phone interview or a video chat, and then assessing, are they going to have the potential to be on the growth design team, and do they complement the rest of my team? So these are just certain key attributes. When I talk about the aptitude for designing for growth, I would say this is the most important thing in looking out for a product designer who is designing for growth. Do they get the design process inside out? I shouldn't have to teach them what the core user-centered approach to design means. Are they more scrappy creative, or are they more systematic and scientific in their approach? Do they have the fearlessness to ask the right questions? Are they able to debate with their PM in a healthy way versus getting very attached with their design? Are they okay with failure? This is a very important one for designers because we love our designs and we do get attached to what we believe in. Can they collaborate for high impact? Coming back to the core definition of growth. And then at the back of my mind, I've noticed typically designers who have an entrepreneurial streak or who are geeky about business or who have a scientific mindset tend to be stronger product designers for growth. I won't dive into too much of the knowledge and craft because it's very similar to what we do as product designers. With craft, of course, accessibility and UI components is becoming very integral even to design problems for growth. So in summary, growth designers first and foremost are strong product designers, and their unique aptitude is a curiosity for business and the metrics, the bottom line, along with being a voice for the customer. The last section of the talk, which is the practice of growth and really riffing off of a lot of what Lex has already covered. How does one solve for growth opportunities? What does this design methodology look like? Again, a lot of it is rooted in the core user-centered approach to design. Cannot emphasize enough, it's important to know your customer. Don't just trust what your PM said. Work with your qualitative researcher, work with the data scientists and the market researcher to understand the psychographic and demographic of who it is that's going to help grow your business. Because it's finally the customers who come and stay with your product that will help you with the revenue. Define the core problem, create a vision, write hypotheses. So in the talk tomorrow, I think they will cover a lot more about what does it mean to write a hypothesis. Basically, it is a statement that says, we believe if we did X, in order to move Y, Z could happen. And once you have a hypothesis that you've written, you create a bunch of design variables and be prepared that some of those design variables will succeed and some of them will fail. You then learn from those failures, you iterate, and then you launch, as Lex called out, shipping. And throughout this process, it's really, really important. And this is where the design leader becomes important to the growth team to stay aligned with all those members that I mentioned, from marketing, social media, product design to the outside. One of the ways in which one can establish a vision for growth is storyboarding. Another is at Script, we tried this monthly recurring design lab day where only designers were in the room and we would take a problem and an unforgotten area and work with it. Another thing that design leaders can really focus on is defining a mission statement for your design team that aligns with the vision of the larger growth team. This was one that we came up with for Netflix that was relevant for 2018-19. And Lex covered some of these. Also want to call out, while I'm talking about what to do, I'm also talking about what not to do. Featureitis is a complete no-no for designers on the growth team. Really make sure that there is product market fit and then growth makes sense. Already covered, one size does not fit all. And there's a point at which growth will slow down, so it's important for the team to redefine what they're going to focus on. Last but not the least, so what value can design leadership bring to a growth team? And this was, I think, a summary of my own journey. It's in 3 parts. Certainly, strategy, being a voice with the cross-functional stakeholders. You may have the strategy, you may have the North Star, great ideas, great concepts, but tests are not going out on time. There's a backlog. There isn't speed, there isn't agility. So it's very important for the design leader to have a way in which to get stuff done. And last but not the least, forging relationships. I'm not saying that these three areas that design leadership plays is not relevant for non-growth teams. They probably do overlap quite a bit. But the one that's really important here is to evangelize the wins and failures that your growth design team is doing so that you can really help the non-growth teams to understand the value that your team is bringing. I've often been asked, so how do you assess what is good design for growth? And even today, I do go back to Dieter Rams' 10 principles for good design, which, believe it or not, still stand true for me. They're pretty ephemeral. And the one thing I would add, as I set the benchmark for product designers who are designing for growth, is today, good design is also design that needs to be responsible. Lex and I were chatting. She often gets questions about the ethics behind certain design decisions that are made because a company wants to make money. There's metrics, revenue, and then there is the responsibility that a designer has to get stuff done. So with that, here's a summary of the 6 questions that I've tried to take a stab at across these 3 buckets. And I want to end with a quote that's been a driving aspect in my life, which is, the principle underlying all solutions is the question that was asked. So for us in this room, we're not going to have all the answers, neither do I, neither does Lex, but we do want to make sure that you feel courageous and sort of curious enough to ask the right questions, both for your customers and for your team. And with that, thank you very much.